check. Can you see my slides, or at least the first one? Question not for dummies. Perfect. So hello everyone, welcome to the second day of this conference. I'm super happy to be a part of this as a speaker, and I hope you're doing well. How is it? Is this, or this? It's the morning, so I suppose, oh, perfect, yeah. So good moods for now, it's perfect to start. So my name is Marta Wisniewska, I am from Poland, and this is my very first international conference after a COVID break, so it's super exciting to be here, to travel and to meet Spanish people, because they are really nice. And today I want to tell you about Core Web Vitals. I will tell you how you can keep them under control. And whoever heard about this term? Okay, it's a perfect place to explain it. So, and this is a term like Google specified a set of metrics that are universal, user-centered, to qualify somehow user experience. And Google uses this set of metrics in their tools to rank web apps. So to say that this app is like good of the quality of the user experience, this needs to be improved. And today I will tell you which exactly metrics build this set, which are tools that allows you to measure them, to debug. I will tell you also what are the poor results and the reason of those poor results. And last but not least, I will tell you like more practical. I will tell you about my project in which I wanted to improve the user experience like based on the recommendations by Google. Like it was existing Angular frontend app, and I wanted only to focus only on the metrics that were poor in my results. So I will tell you what were my learnings, and maybe then you will know how to prevent them in the future in your implementations. So a few words about me. So my name is Marta Wisniewska, I'm from Poland, I live in Warsaw, but I work remotely. I work for a company from Netherlands, it's called Acorel, and mainly we do projects for e-commerce, and I use Angular and also SubCommerce Cloud. But besides, I am a Google developer expert in Angular and web technologies, so it means that I do conference talks, I also create some technical content, write blog posts, create code labs, and so on. And technically, I'm passionate about Angular, web performance, progressive web apps, and e-commerce. So this is when you can find some content about me. It's mainly that are my area of interests. And besides, I'm a huge fan of sport, traveling, and dancing. And this is one story that when I started dance, Latin dance, like salsa, bachata, reggaeton, and then I started to listen a lot of like Spanish music, Spanish songs, and I started to sing them and check the Spanish lyrics, and then I realized this is really perfect language for songs, and I started to learn Spanish, so it was 1 year ago, so this is my story. I'm still improving, but I really enjoy it, so maybe one day I will tell that I am Google developer expert in Angular, web technologies, salsa, and Spanish songs. Let's wait. Yeah, and if you want to keep in touch, this is my Twitter username, or you can find me on LinkedIn or any social network. And besides, because every time when I'm speaking, I wish I could have an assistant, like a person who will remind me about some topics or ask questions, because typically people don't have. So let's have some help. And I had two requirements before I selected the proper one. The first one, that this person needs to be rather popular to most of my audience, and the second, that needs to be experienced. And he is very experienced. It was the Microsoft Assistant. It's a very old one, and to be honest, for me, he was a bit annoying. But he did some job here, like suggesting something. So I bring him to Tenerife. So yeah, he will help me today. And there's a fun fact, because some time ago, Microsoft challenged the Microsoft users, and they wrote this tweet that if this tweet we received more than 20,000 of likes, they will create like a Clippy emoji in Microsoft 365. And as you can see, it received more than 170,000 of likes, so people really like him. So he's a perfect person to be here. And the second fun fact is that this is a transformation of Clippy from the initial version in Microsoft to the current one. So for me, it's like totally like the Pokemon transformation from Pikachu to Raichu. And it looks like you're not talking about core web vitals. Need some help. So yeah, he's doing a good job for now. So yeah, we started talking about core web vitals. So why, in general, we use it? So because programmers and engineers love to model everything and to control everything. So one day they decided to somehow like estimate the user experience. And at the first sight, it maybe seems to be a bit difficult because user experience is quite relative. So for one person, this app is good, but for another, he would say that he doesn't like it. So Google engineers were trying to find like universal factors that are rather noticeable for the most of the users. And based on those factors, they selected some metrics that they will measure in the browser to be able to somehow like estimate this quality of user experience. And they selected 3 factors. The first factor, this is loading time. So how fast the app is loading. The second, this is interactivity. So how fast the app responds to user interactions. And the last one, this is the visual stability. So how the layout is stable while we're using this app like in the production. And they selected those metrics that will represent those factors. And the first one is largest contentful paint. And don't be confused with first contentful paint. So largest contentful paint is measured when the largest contentful element is visible in the viewport. And they also wanted to find some like borders, some zones that would say that this score is good for web app, but this not. And for the largest contentful paint, the good score is like less than 2.5 of the second. Between 2.5 and 4, it rather needs to be improved, but for more than 4 seconds, it's highly recommended to improve. For interactivity, they selected first input delay. So this is the time that is measured after the first interactions, like for example, after the first click or after the first scroll. And this we rather measure in milliseconds, and there's also like some borders. Like for good score, this is less than 100 of milliseconds. Between 100 and 300, it's fine, but needs to be improved. But for more than 300 of milliseconds, it's highly recommended to improve. And for visual stability, we of course don't measure time, but we measure a value. We want to somehow like estimate what is the instability of the page. So they selected like it will be layout shift value. And to be able like to somehow measure the total instability, they selected cumulative layout shift. So this is the layout shift value that is like estimated by the total period of time that user spends on it. And to be able to say that in general total app is good, you rather needs to achieve for those 3 metrics those like green results. But this is a good question that it looks like you haven't explained the good threshold. So it means that to be sure that we like ensure the most of the users on our app, we need to have like 75th percentile of user that is segmented across mobiles and desktops. Because you can receive like different results for the same metric, for the same app, but on different network conditions, different device, different results. So that's why we should like to be really accurate and to be sure that this app is like really receive those metrics, those results. We need to like remember about this threshold. But it's like if you want to be really like precise and like to be due to the Google recommendations. And now I want to tell you a bit about the poor results for those metrics. So first, like for the loading, for the largest contentful paint, the main reason this is slow server response time. And to improve it, first of all, take a look at the server, try to optimize. You can also route your users to an RBCDN. You can cache assets, you can cache like the HTML pages. Also try to establish third-party connections early. For render blocking JavaScript and CSS, try to optimize your code. You can inline critical CSS and defer non-critical CSS. For JavaScript, like remove everything what is like trash, like everything, and use polyfills, for example, and in general minimize the amount of JavaScript. For client-side rendering, you need to think even before the implementation, like in the design phase. Like maybe you can use another way of rendering, like server-side rendering or pre-rendering, because this kind is quite slow and also will make this result poorer. And slow resource load time. So for this, mainly responsible assets. So try to optimize and compress all your assets, especially images, compress text files. You can also use service worker and cache your resources. For first input delay and for the interactions, first of all, long tasks. So we delivered two long JavaScript to the single page apps. So try to break them out and try to deliver smaller JavaScript asynchronous tasks. For long execution time of JavaScript, it's the same. We minimize the JavaScript as much as we can because the JavaScript is the most costful, let's say, part of the loading of the full app. Large JavaScript bundles, use code splitting and split your code. A render blocking JavaScript, you can use async and defer, to defer the third-party scripts and so on. For cumulative layout shift, for instability, one of the most reasons that are elements without dimensions, like images, iframes, adds, embed, and so on. So always remember about adding dimensions for all of your elements. Also dynamically injected content. So for this, quite often responsible are transformations, like animations, I mean. And Google recommends rather use transform animations than the animations of the properties. And the last one that are web fonts that will cause the flash on invisible text and flash on unstyled text. And there are some recommendations from Google, you can, for example, use this CSS property. I'm not sure if you can read it, but this property allows you to modify the behavior, how we load the font. And also you can specify two fonts. If the first one, the primary font, is not loaded, you can use the secondary font. So in this way, for example, if you have a poor connection, if your font is not able to load very fast, then you just use the secondary font. So this is the one tip. Another is nice API that is called font loading API, and also allows you to deliver the key font as much as possible, as faster as possible. And also Google recommends using preloading for the fonts. So it's this one. So we use the preload plus the font display set to optional. So this is another trick how to improve this cumulative layout shift. So now let's take a look how we can measure those metrics. So in general, the tools were possible to divide into two categories. The first one that are tools in the lab. So in those tools, we will measure those metrics in simulated environments. So in, for example, simulated device, simulated screen sizes, network conditions, and so on. And in this category, you have Chrome DevTools and the tab performance that allows you to simulate some environments variables and also measure those three specific metrics. But also we have PageSpeed insights. As you can see, it's possible to use it for the tools in the field and tools in the lab. Also Lighthouse, very typical web page test and Web Vitals extension. And for the lab in the field, so we measure on the real users. So we use the aggregated data on the apps that are already in the production and users spends in real reality, not in the simulated environment. So in this kind of tools, we have Chrome User Experience Report, PageSpeed Insights, Search Console, and Web Vitals JavaScript library. And I will tell you a bit more about it in the next slides. And in general, there's no a perfect tool. It really depends what you want to do. If you want to, for example, have really accurate data, then use labs in the field, tools in the field. If you want to have rather find your weak point in your app and find direction in which you can improve it, and for example, I forgot what I want to say. Then use, I know, the implementation, if you want during implementation, like check if this, for example, this implementation, it will make it poorer or better, then use the tools in the lab. So this is how it works, for example, the Chrome DevTools. If you open the Performance tab, if you check the Core Web Vitals, start to profile, you will see like a chart, results, and those, it's maybe not very visible, but there are like 3 dots. And those results is first contentful paint, largest contentful paint, and the cumulative layout shift probably. So this is the easiest one that you can use. The second, this is very nice Web Vitals Chrome extension. So this is a Google extension that allows you to measure those 3 specific metrics. And also you will get like these colors that are specific. So you will know that this results for this specific metric is good. And you will find, for example, which one is not good and rather needs to be improved. Another one, this is web page tests. So this is how it looks like, that you will enter a URL of your app. You can like select the configuration, for example, for mobile or desktop. And it gives you not only like the results for those metrics, but also like more details. For example, which element causes the largest contentful paint. You also get this kind of chart. So you have more opportunity to find those weakness points and to analyze it. But it really depends like what do you want to achieve. And also it's like give you some, like it slowed down some loading of your app like this one. And you can also in this way analyze how the elements causes of this loading, maybe which element also is a weak point of your app. Okay, and this is something more for programmers that you can integrate in your code. So this is Web Vitals JavaScript library. And it measures those 3-hour metrics that are the most important, but also you can measure first contentful paint and time to first byte. And you can install it with npm. So if you want to find it, just take a look at the npm packages and type this name. So installation, npm install, and what it gives you like ready to measure metrics. So the first, how you can test it, just display what it will display in your browser for a specific app. But to be honest, in more practical case, we want to somehow save those data to aggregate and then to be able to analyze. So what we can do, the first one, you can just create endpoint and save this data to database. The second case that we can do is just to integrate with Google Analytics and use Google Analytics events, and the events as a value, you can then pass those values and then to be able to analyze like in a Google Analytics account. So this is like the dashboard. So those metrics are measured as a Google events. And there is also like another tool that is also like you can integrate with Google Analytics and even more because it gives like ready to use dashboards, and you only need to integrate with Google Analytics project. So you open this one, like you connect, and of course give you access to your Google Analytics account, and then you're able to get those results for Core Web Vitals and also like some details about your specific project. Yeah, Clippy, just show your learnings. So this is time to show you what I have learned by improving one Angular app that I created when I was a student. So there was like some weakness points, of course, and this was really funny when I was reading my code that I wrote a few years ago. Then oh my God, what I wrote, who wrote it? And it was me, oh my God. So yeah, the code review for myself, it was the worst one. It's always worked the same. You're really surprised that you could wrote it. So yes, I want to show you the app. So it has 3 tabs. The first one, it was like typical product list page that I could switch the view. And I had like 100 of results with images. The second, it was blog with 2 tabs, and also like the part of removing items. And I have photos, and there was a lot of, it was like 5,000 of the photos. And as you can see, it like wasn't loading very fast. It had implemented the infinity scroll, but also it was like quite medium. And the second tab of this, it was posts. So I was able to see without images, but only with some notes and some text and header that I was able also to remove. And the last tab, it was player. So I had some carousel with navigation, I had some YouTube videos, and when I click specific video, then it played on the screen. So it was the app at the beginning before the like improving. So what I decided to do, I wanted to measure those metrics like as soon as possible, because I wasn't aware about really accurate data, because I know that they're different and they change all the time. So I wanted to see how my implementation will respond to those results. So I used this extension, and I found that my weakness point is cumulative layout shift. And when I saw this, I noticed that, yeah, actually it is true, because sometimes when I was like moving, I thought that those elements wasn't in the proper spaces. So maybe it was like a good point to improve. And I want to show you like a very good explanation how the cumulative layout shift works. So this is the first one that is really unstable. Let's say that I want to click and do some action, but then in the moment, the banner like is visible and I don't click what I want, but something different. So this is cumulative layout shift that is like 0.44. But this is a proper one that I reserve a space for the banner. So even if it's not loaded already, then I click on the thing and I do the action that I want. So this is a cumulative layout shift that is 0. So the first thing, I started to analyze the code. I started to take a look how it works, started to testing. And the first thing that I found that are missing sizes of images and iframes, because I had a lot of images and also those iframes, so I wanted to focus on this aspect. And this is quite a common issue. And I think why we forget about this is that we started using like responsive designs. We started to implement in this way, that we only specify the width and, for example, the auto or the opposite. But we should really remember about like define the proper for each dimensions to define those properties, because in this way we really reserve space for the images, for the iframes, and so on. So one way is like native one, but of course the good also is with CSS. So the first tip and my learnings, always add dimensions to your images, videos, and iframes. And this is like one trick that you can use, the CSS property called aspect ratio. So you don't need to like every time write those 2 dimensions, but you can like set proportions. So then you can only like define the one, but the second is like calculated automatically. So this is how it works. And Clippy is something telling the property seems to be new. How is the browser support for this feature? So let's take a look at the browser support for this feature. And it's quite classical, because you have the Internet Explorer that doesn't work. But for the most modern browsers, it's working. So let's use it. The second, maybe not issue, but a point that I could improve because of a lot of images and iframes, it was lazy loading. So right now, you have a nice way to use native lazy loading. I will show you the browser support in the next slides. So in this way, you can use it also for iframes, like setting the loading property to lazy. And this is the browser support. So it's a bit worse. It works with Chromium-powered browsers, but for Safari and Opera, it won't work, of course, for Internet Explorer as well. And so what you can do, if you really want to have it working on all of the browsers, your intersection observer API, and this way you can implement with JavaScript. But to be honest, if you use it in this native way, then you don't break things. You will improve for many browsers, but to be honest, like, it will also work for Safari as normal images, so it's fine. So tip number 2 and my learnings: lazy load images and iframes. Okay, the next point I found in this tab, I noticed that I implemented this carousel that was only like kind of navigation as iframes. So each of this thumbnail, it was iframed, but actually without any sense. It was really slowed down the full app, but it could be like normal image. So as you can see, like, each of this was iframe with like the link to the YouTube. So what I did, of course, I wanted to replace it with images. And I will show you. So this is next tip and learning. Use light thumbnails and placeholders for HTML elements. And this is one tip how you can do it from the Chrome Developer Tool. So if you do inspect, if you click a specific node of the DOM, click right mouse button, there is like capture node screenshot. And then you will get your ready image to download in PNG format. So it's not really the best format. It's very traditional, classic one, but right now you have like more modern formats. So what I did at the beginning, I just downloaded for each of those nodes the PNG image, but then I wanted, of course, also improve it. And I decided to format it into WebP format. This is next, the classical browser support, but I decided to use it. It's good, it's like good, it's good quality characteristics and so on. Much smaller size for images, so let's use it. And I found like this app, like I had only like 6 images, so I wanted to have it for free converted, so I used this app. I converted to WebP format. But also if you have like a lot of images, and there is a nice tool in Node.js that you can, from your console log, you can convert multiple images into WebP format. So I did it, as even if you can see that if I refresh the page, it was much faster to load it. Yeah, it was immediately like I receive it. So it was like my next improvement, and I will show you also that I added this and also added, of course, dimensions, also lazy loaded, yeah, and applied this format. That was the most important thing. So tip number 4, compress and optimize images. And also another point that I found with this tab, it was this layout shift before I selected the first video to play. Because then this carousel changed the position. So it was also a bit of cumulative layout shift. So it was, I wanted to improve this point. And what I did, I just added a placeholder for the place of the player. And this is the reminder how it works. So as this banner, I added some placeholder like my carousel. I will show you here. Yeah, so I added this one. And when I changed, like when I selected the first video, then it was like switched to the iframe. So I had all these elements in proper space from the beginning. So tip number 5, reserve space for HTML elements by adding placeholders. Of course, this image also was converted, compressed, lazy loaded, and with dimensions. And the last thing I did, I wanted to take a look at the fonts and do what the Google recommends. I didn't have too much text, but I also did this trick that I used 2 fonts, secondary and the primary, and I set font display to optional. Also, I preloaded my fonts. So it also improved my score. Tip number 6, preload key fonts and optimize the rendering behavior of your fonts. So at the end, I did these measurements. I wanted to have like very similar environment for my app, so the same network conditions, the same device, and then as you can see, like all those metrics were in the green zone. So it's like the user experience were improved, but also when I was using them, I felt that it's like much faster and this cumulative layout rate is much lower. So the summary of my learnings, always add dimensions to your images, videos, and iframes, lazy load images and iframes, reserve space for HTML elements with placeholders, compress and optimize them, use modern image formats. So that were my learnings, and I hope also will help you with your next implementations. So summary, prevent against repairing. So you know what are the weakness points, how you can improve it before in the phase of implementation. Remember about these recommended targets of measures, like Google recommends, because one measurement is good if you want to compare on the same, the same conditions for your app. And those APIs are still evolving, so even if you improve, because Google engineers are trying still to find the best option how to measure those metrics, so like these APIs are still evolving, interfaces are still like improving, so remember that it's not like very strict, very accurate in this moment. And that's only Google Chrome recommendations, so if you can see that maybe this tip doesn't work for your app, maybe it will make like worse the first contentful paint, then don't do it. Like also maybe it doesn't like match your business requirements, also don't do it. It's like really only recommendations. So try to do it, and if it works for you, it's totally fine. And yeah, it seems that we finished. Creepy is right. And if you want this full presentation, it's possible to download it here. And thank you so much for your attention. And I hope you learn at least one new thing. So it's a big success for me and also for you. And yeah, muchas gracias. Thank you so much. It should be. I will give you. It was tricky. I wanted to check if you will use it.
So, questions?
Pressing the yellow button at the top.
Ivan?
Yeah, I know. One moment.
Okay.
I will check. So maybe only you don't have access. But you tried the barcode or the...
The button?
I tried the direct link, not the QR code.
This one you need to change here to
one moment, because maybe I show you the wrong one. Maybe try, it's tricky one, Vitals Marta, because at the end I changed the link. Try this one.
Okay, Marta, I have a question. I'm here.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, my question, well, first, thank you for the talk. My question is if it's a good idea to integrate the JavaScript library you mentioned, I have the name here, the Web Vitals, yeah, with Jest or a similar tool in order to prevent to deploy a non-performant website to production. Maybe we can integrate that with the CI or something. Is that a good idea, or do you recommend a different tool for that?
Try to explain, because I didn't catch.
I mean, my idea will be to create a set of tests, just check the performance of my website, and if I have a bad score in Web Vitals, prevent to deploy that website to production, and fix that, and then once I have a green score, then deploy. So, is that a good idea?
What was the most convenient for me to integrate with Google Analytics. like this kind of app. It was like the integration is really good. It's easy to integrate, so many like ready-to-use functions, and yeah, for me it was the best one.
Okay, thank you.
Does it work, the second link? Really? Try now.
Tengo, bueno, la cuenta Pro de Verse, tengo la Real Time Analytics, pero sí es verdad que no está tan bien, o sea, no ves tantas métricas como la ves con la web Core Byte.
Yeah, it should be good.
I have another question. So it's more like a product management thing in terms of I want to create the performance culture in the product that I'm working, right? We have problems with performance, and it's part also to educate the client to know that working in performance is important, okay? So I'm like drafting a performance plan, which includes in an agile environment, each sprint. That was my initial idea, and I want like consult a little bit if you think
To be
it's
honest, I don't have like this kind of experience, but yeah, let's try. Let's go.
like my idea was to do like audience with the tools, with different tools, not only Lighthouse Score, but with different tools to each sprint to get like the KPIs for that that moment, right? And then add a new task for solving a specific issue, a small issue, incrementally, and then test again. One part of that also will be to add something in the CI/CD, like Lighthouse Score API, to check that anything that I'm making to the main branch is not going to affect the performance, right? And then iterate, like each sprint, analyze again. But I really like the analytics one, so I don't know. Is it better to do a proper scan of your web application and then work like one sprint only in analytics? So you
Yeah,
have
I think
experience
so.
with that?
Because it's just the easiest point. Just in case you can try to implement on your own and like totally take a look how the Google implements and try to do what you really need, because sometimes like you maybe need more, you have like own requirements, and take a look at the implementation because everything is like totally open and public. So maybe in this case you can like use like similar APIs and somehow modify it to your needs. But in general they have a lot of things that you can reuse.
I also saw in another talk that if you want to keep them private, then you need to have a server for Lighthouse Score, right?
Yeah.
Because the
Yeah,
normally
of
it's
course.
public. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Amazing
problem.
talk. Thank you.
Another question? No? Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.